Good evening, everybody. My name is Sean Callahan. I'm the Director of Marine Corps History Division, and it is my honor to invite everybody here for the inaugural lecture of our 7-part series designed to commemorate the 250th birthday of our Marine Corps here at Marine Corps University. In this series, we've brought together some cutting-edge scholars of Marine Corps history so that they can discuss the development of 7 cultural and organizational traits which have come to define our Corps. Each lecture will trace the development of one of these traits throughout the Corps' long history. In the end, by coming to an appreciation of how the Marine Corps came to be an inherently naval and combined arms force, which places special emphasis on small unit leadership and flexibility, and which carefully cultivates its public and self-image, you will have a much sounder appreciation for why Marines and their Corps are the way they are. And for the Marines in the audience, this will be a journey of self-discovery. Some of what you hear may be surprising, but it will lead to greater self-awareness and an appreciation of our unique service and its culture. These lectures are being recorded for public distribution, but will also ultimately be captured as chapters in a compiled, published work in 2027. So I have here tonight History Division's latest publication, Semper Fidelis, 250 Years of Honor, Courage, and Commitment. And I'm glad to see so many of you have taken copies with you tonight. Know that our target audience for this is the American public, recruits, entry-level training, first-term Marines. It's a good basic overview of our Corps, its full 250-year history, because we haven't had one in some time. But when we take these lectures and compile them as chapters in a book, that's going to be a more scholarly companion to this publication right here. So the lecture series and that final compiled book are only possible due to the generosity of the Marine Corps Heritage Foundation, which has provided writing stipends to most of the authors that you see listed here above. I should also point out that most of the speakers on this list have also been recipients of either the Lieutenant Colonel Lily H. Gridley Master's Thesis Fellowship or the General Lemuel C. Shepard Jr. Dissertation Fellowship, if not both. So these fellowships, funded by the Heritage Foundation, help graduate students to pursue their passion for Marine Corps history and yield real results in terms of scholarship in the field. I'm happy to say that through the generous support of the Heritage Foundation, after a few years off, we've reinstituted these fellowships and selected our first 2 fellows for this year. I also want to thank tonight Colonel Kyle Gentry, United States Marine Corps retired, and the staff of the National Museum of the Marine Corps for hosting this event and for being such enthusiastic partners all along. I should mention that this Friday, on the opposite end of the atrium, they'll be doing the official ribbon cutting for a new exhibit designed to commemorate our 250-year history through a special exhibit of different artifacts which don't usually see the light of day. So they've brought those out in a special exhibit that's actually technically open right here and right now, if not officially. So they include things like Smedley Butler's 2 Medals of Honor, the guidon, the company guidon that Captain William Barber had in his pocket at Taktong Pass, and one of the Korean cannons captured in the Korean forts in 1871. So truly some amazing artifacts that speak to critical moments in our history. Well, let's get tonight's event. Our main speaker is Major Chris Hemler, the United States Marine Corps Reserve, who is a member of History Division's Field History Branch and our Reserve IMA detachment. So in his mild-mannered alter ego, his day job, he is that of Dr. Chris Hemler, Assistant Professor of Naval and Military History at the U.S. Naval Academy. Chris was commissioned in 2012 from the United States Naval Academy and served on active duty for 10 years as an Air Command and Control Officer, with a final assignment teaching history at the Academy and also serving as the staff director for the Commandant of Midshipmen. Transitioning to civilian life in 2022, he earned his PhD in military history from Texas A&M University, then served as a course director for the U.S. Naval Community College before assuming his current position at the History Department at the Naval Academy again just last month. So congratulations on that assignment. Major Hemler's research interests include 20th century Marine Corps history, naval strategy, and military adaptation. He's written for Marine Corps History Journal and also for Naval History Magazine, but his most significant contribution to the field is this book right here, 2023 U.S. Naval Institute's Delivering Destruction, American Firepower, Amphibious Assault from Tarawa to Iwo Jima. And I really commend this to you for your reading. Tonight, you're going to get a glimpse of what he talks about in this book, but an expansion to learn much more about it in his lecture titled The Emergence of Combined Arms as a Central Feature of Marine Corps Warfighting. So I ask that you hold your questions until the designated period at the end of the lecture. And with that, please join me in providing a warm welcome for Chris Hemler.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's really an honor to be here. Can you hear me okay in the back? We're good on the mic, terrific. Director Callahan, thank you for organizing all of this. Colonel Gentry, thank you for your hospitality as well. It's no small feat to pull an event like this off, and I really do appreciate the time of everyone in attendance tonight. My intent is to speak for maybe 30 minutes. I've got a nice bright clock in the back that'll help me do that. And my first mistake was not bringing free books. That would have been a better move, but you'll have to take Dr. Callahan's free books out front, Semper Fidelis. Let's see. I do want to commend one final note for Dr. Callahan. I appreciate the invitation to be part of this volume, and I might note that the only thing harder than leading Marines might be leading academics, and so I do applaud your efforts in trying to wrangle these 7 authors together and produce what we hope will be a really wonderful contribution to Marine Corps history when this marathon is all done. I should mention as well our obligatory disclaimer that my remarks tonight are not a reflection of the Marine Corps, the Navy Department, or the Department of Defense. They are entirely my own, my thoughts and my analysis. As Dr. Callahan mentioned, this lecture series and the volume that we'll contribute to is intended to draw out a number of themes in Marine Corps history. And as the title implies, tonight I want to share with you the history of the Corps as understood through its development of combined arms. This audience will not need the reminder that the Marine Corps is a combined arms force. Its very existence, its relevance today is predicated on that fact. And yet that was not always the case. For more than a century, the Corps stumbled through, explored, and eventually embraced combined arms. But it was only after several formative stages. What I want to do tonight is walk you through maybe a general history of the Corps of sorts, while highlighting some important developments in those combined arms that we'll take a look at. And I'll give you my argument up front right here as we begin. While the Marine Corps of the 18th and the 19th centuries engaged in modest and limited combined arms operations, it was the 20th century Marine Corps that steadily embraced a combined arms identity. And it was this transformation that slowly but convincingly grew the service's capabilities, strengthened its culture, and multiplied its utility to the nation. And I think each of those aspects is worth reflection. As we begin, I'll share this framework with you. This is my maybe version 1.0 of how I look at the combined arms development of the Marine Corps. And as we go through, as I go through my comments tonight, I hope to impress upon you examples of each of these phases. Phase 1 being that of exploration. The Marine Corps was engaging in limited, episodic, almost opportunistic combined arms exploration. It was then in the interwar period where they drew together a number of divergent experiences from the Great War, from the Banana Wars, from domestic efforts at home in the likes of Alfred Cunningham and other pioneers. Here, the Marine Corps is producing what I call a growing conviction of combined arms. Here, the ideas are in front of the capability. It will surprise very few of you to recognize that the Second World War incentivized and accelerated the Marines' development of combined arms in a way that few other events could have. And this produced a sharp period of adoption. We'll get into that this evening. And then finally, the fourth and more modern period of what I call employment, ranging from the end of the Korean War until the present day. Now, I should mention that my research is underway. I'm not complete yet with this project, and I've already admitted that to Director Callahan, so our publishing date is not yet on the calendar. So I feel okay telling you that. I won't share much on employment. I'm about at the World War II, the end of the war in my effort, and so you're going to hear much more about phases 1, 2, and 3 this evening. And I'll also mention the caveat that this is a room full of Marines. This is a room full of scholars. there are many familiar faces that I just saw in Annapolis last week at the McMullen Naval History Conference, and especially when a scholar is asked to provide a survey, which is to say 200 or 250 years of history. I am far from an expert in each and every aspect. And so I hope after my remarks we'll have an opportunity to engage with one another, and I can learn from you here this evening. You won't need the reminder that the Marine Corps was born a naval force, and although Marines occasionally participated in landing operations and sharpshooter actions during naval engagements during the age of sail, the primary functions of the Corps were in fact on the ship itself, preventing mutinies, protecting the life and authority of the captain, guarding the weapons, and yes, even guarding the rum, at least until 1862. Now, Continental Marines did help to fill empty voids in Washington's Continental Army, particularly in some of the artillery ranks of that Continental Army, but it wasn't until the commandancy of Archibald Henderson, which begins in 1820, and therefore I peg as the opening of this exploration phase. It was not until Henderson's commandancy that the Corps made any serious effort to embrace field artillery as an organic capability. It was Henderson, more than any previous leader, that strengthened the Marines' interest in gunnery and made this a priority educational aim for his young officers. Even for the grand old man of the Marine Corps, however, progress came in fits and starts. It took another 15 years or so before Henderson's chief lieutenant, Israel Green, argued for increased artillery instruction within the Corps, and eventually convinced Henderson to procure a heavy and light artillery battery at the Washington Navy Yard for the Marines' use. Green was convinced that the improved naval gunnery of the era, which was creating further and further engagement distances at sea, meant that the Marines' muskets were becoming increasingly obsolete. And the Marines must cling to the, quote, great guns of that naval era if they were to remain relevant. Henderson responded to Green's initiative and dispatched him to West Point in the 1850s to study U.S. Army artillery training and bring back those lessons to impress upon the Corps. Unfortunately for these early Marine cannoneers, Henderson died in 1859 at the ripe age of 75 years old. He had worn the uniform, as many of you know, for 52 years and served as commandant for almost 4 decades. A feat which is unlikely to ever be surpassed. Although Henderson's foundation did lay dormant for some years, it was his early initiative that allowed for the later expansion of field artillery within the Marine Corps. When reformer Commandant Charles Haywood established the School of Application in 1891 to professionalize officer indoctrination, Haywood immediately chartered a Department of Artillery. This was a natural and organic development based upon Henderson's early work. Here, the Marines would continue to indoctrinate their young officers at the Navy Yard with the fundamentals of both naval and field artillery. In part because of this early foundation, the Marine battalions that were dispatched to Cuba, the Philippines, and the Boxer Rebellion between 1898 and 1902 were all equipped with a company of artillery, manning at the time traditional 3-inch guns. As it did for military services around the world, World War I brought profound change to the Marines' organizational structure and their interest in combined arms. In early 1918, the Corps collapsed its artillery capabilities into the 10th and 11th Marine Regiments. However, despite their aggressive petitioning, neither of these artillery outfits were called to Europe. The 4th Marine Brigade would get its support from, you guessed it, the U.S. Army. As much as anything, the battles of France did teach the 4th Marine Brigade about the need for heavy organic arms and close cooperation with field artillery. Here we might say that the Marines encountered and explored combined arms. They returned home more curious about the utility of those weapons and the future that they might bring. While the Great War provided practical field lessons, it also helped the Corps to mature conceptually. General John Lejeune, who ended the war as the celebrated Marine commander of the U.S. Army's 2nd Division, emphasized the need for integration and familiarity within his combined arms team. Here's how Lejeune put it. Quote, "The key to combat effectiveness is unity, an esprit that characterizes itself in complete, irrevocable mutual trust. Now my infantry trusts my artillery and my engineers, and my artillery and engineers know this, so they will go through hell itself before they let down the infantry. Now, as I've mentioned, this initial period might be labeled a season of experimentation. The Corps was taking modest and uncertain steps, much of it dating to the commandancy of Archibald Henderson. And while that foundation was ultimately quite important, the progress was episodic, and it was driven by individual initiative. The progress was also, by its very nature, limited. Not until the First World War did the Marines surpass more than 10,000 total troops. Its potential was therefore fundamentally limited by its size. As Lejeune polished that team spirit, it was Alfred A. Cunningham who was hard at work developing the Marines' aviation capabilities. Cunningham had picked up his aviation training in 1912 at Greenbury Point in Maryland, and in 1916 he convinced Commandant George Barnett to authorize a Marine Corps aviation company of 10 officers and 40 men. However, to Cunningham's chagrin, these Marine pilots were prohibited from direct support missions in the Great War. Instead, the Marine squadrons were assigned to less desirable patrols and interdiction operations as part of the Navy's Northern Bombing Group. Upon his return from Europe, and perhaps in reaction to Marine Air's use in Europe, Cunningham mounted a stirring case for aviation within the Corps, and he put these ideas in the Marine Corps Gazette in 1920. The future was bright, Cunningham argued, if aviation skeptics would simply explore the possibilities. Reconnaissance airplanes could deliver extraordinary intelligence to commanders on the ground. Pilots could track enemy movements from above. They could assist with target identification. They could support reinforcement and retreat schemes. Fire support from the air promised not only physical destruction, but in Cunningham's words, it could also, quote, demoralize enemy resistance and ease the burden of the landing force. Although aviation duty required significant experience and technical expertise, Cunningham demanded that his pilots remain loyal to the Marine Corps itself. Marine pilots of the 1920s, on Cunningham's order, would only advance to flight training after, quote, thorough indoctrination as Marine officers and a basic required period of infantry service. After a standard 5-year aviation tour, Cunningham insisted that they return to duty with the fleet, quote, duty with the troops, in Cunningham's words. Even from their cockpits, Marine aviators were to remain first and foremost Marines. For Cunningham, air power existed to serve the Corps. Aviators sought integration and harmony, not parochial division within the service. Quote, the only excuse for aviation in any service, Cunningham wrote, is its usefulness in assisting the troops on the ground to successfully carry out their operations. As Cunningham led this PR campaign, Marine aviators were learning on the fly in the Banana Wars. Here I'll provide a plug for this terrific book, Biplanes at War by Ray Johnson. It's well worth your time and helps to unpack this very important and foundational era in the history of Marine Corps aviation. While these pilots were delivering mail and other basic supplies in the Caribbean, Marine pilots were beginning to scout enemy forces from above and provide invaluable intelligence to Marine units on the ground. Soon, this reconnaissance gave way to more direct and more creative combat participation. Eager to impress, one Marine pilot in Haiti attached a canvas mail pouch beneath his de Havilland DH-4, loaded it with explosives, and ran a release cord along the fuselage to the cockpit. With one tug, the airman proved that biplanes could deliver more than just mail. For the first 2 decades of the 20th century, Marine airmen were regarded as daredevil performers and unnecessary attachments. But by the time of World War II, just 20 years later, those same misfits had championed an identity and carved a contribution. Just as importantly, they built bonds and cultivated trust with the troops serving beneath them. By 1940, the Corps' Small Wars Manual reflected this shift. Quote, in order to secure the full measure of cooperation between the air and ground forces, it's necessary that each understands the problems of the other. The aviator must know something of the tactics of the ground patrol, and he must be ready and willing to assume any justified risk to assist the ground commander. So just as war with Japan became increasingly likely, the Marines were strengthening their commitment to aviation and calibrating the role of this brand new platform. In the words of Smedley Butler, aviators would be, quote, body and soul Marines. In 1941, the United States found itself thrust into the Second World War. And I'll suggest this year as another checkpoint or bookend in our framework for Marine combined arms, this time the conviction phase of combined arms history. When the Japanese bomb struck at Pearl Harbor, the Marine Corps carried a conviction, a certain faith in combined arms. However, that conviction was fragile, it was untested, and it was subject to interpretation from a variety of communities and tactical perspectives. In spite of that conceptual subscription to combined arms, the Corps was grossly inexperienced in the conduct of those operations, particularly within the chaos of an amphibious assault. To make a contemporary analogy, the Marines were comfortable navigating a simple four-way stop sign in a suburban neighborhood, but war in the Pacific would demand that they enter a downtown Manhattan intersection or an interstate rush hour interstate ramp in Los Angeles. The Pacific War would require much more. In 1942, the American occupation of Guadalcanal ignited one of the fiercest campaigns of the entire war. The landing had gone smoothly enough, but early naval gunfire and air support efforts proved more than disappointing. Destroyers Aaron Ward and Lardner reported serious delays in the coordination of their fire missions, in some cases a 3-hour delay confirming targeting details. Pilots overhead struggled with their radio communications. As many of you know, the carriers departed on the 8th of August, and for the next 12 days, the American Marines fought without surface or aerial support. General Vandegrift's lines held against the Japanese Army's nighttime attack on August 21st. The following morning, the Marines maneuvered 3 infantry companies to pin the Japanese force against the river. This time, they threw their light tanks at the Japanese rear, killing 800 troops while losing just 34 dead. The Battle of Alligator Creek provided the 1st Marine Division with a swift and savage introduction to combat in the Pacific. As additional howitzers came ashore and the Cactus Air Force grew from several to several dozen aircraft, Vandegrift's troops turned increasingly to their supporting arms to defend the coveted airfield. The real statistic on Guadalcanal, however, was of course the replacement rate. On 13 September, Vandegrift's force shot down 11 enemy aircraft while losing 5 of their own. That exchange rate was helpful, but it was the 60 planes the Americans brought ashore in the preceding 48 hours that would make the true difference. The Americans had math on their side. As Guadalcanal demonstrated, integrated combined arms were to be the crucial feature of warfare in the Pacific. From their experience in the Solomons, the 1st Marine Division drew important lessons on the use of common targeting maps, on the refinement of coordination procedures between warships and land-based control parties, and on the pioneering use of forward air observers within Marine infantry battalions. The struggle for Guadalcanal also underlined the psychological advantage of fighting with superior firepower and superior supporting arms, an advantage the Marines would embrace across the Central Pacific. Americans consistently acknowledged, as they had begun to believe during the interwar period, that a combined arms approach delivered more than a material advantage. It gave an intense moral advantage against one's opponent. While surging the confidence of friendly units, it also sowed fear and panic in the mind of the opponent. One Marine pilot estimated the moral effect of the airplane to be, quote, out of all proportion to its capacity for physical destruction. Other American troops, as you can imagine, noted the great psychological benefit of fighting alongside an American tank. The battle for Tarawa in November of 1943 taught the 2nd Marine Division much more about combined arms, this time against a well-positioned and zealous Japanese detachment of almost 5,000 troops. Despite eventual victory, however, the assault revealed the Navy and Marine Corps' dangerous dependency on firing timelines, again highlighted their inadequate radios and exposed the many cultural chasms that continued to exist between land, sea, and air forces. In the coming months, the Marines addressed their training gaps and their cultural differences. The 5th Amphibious Corps christened a naval gunfire training section in late 1943 to improve skills in naval gunnery and cross-unit communications. They also commissioned a new tactical outfit known as the Joint Assault Signal Company, which became the primary responsible party for air and naval gunfire support and control teams. This unit, more than any other, would blend the distinct community cultures into synchronized battlefield effort. At Saipan, and for the first time in the war, General Holland Smith physically co-located his artillery, air, and naval gunfire representatives at the Corps command post. This supporting arms tent, as they called it at the time, would later evolve into the Fire Support Coordination Center. It led to stronger awareness and improved integration, including the introduction of a common deconfliction channel for multi-unit combined arms attacks. The firepower it helped to deliver was staggering. In the three-week struggle for Saipan, American ships alone fired more than 138,000 rounds, exceeding 17 million pounds of naval ordnance. Evolution continued at Iwo Jima, where Lieutenant Colonel Donald Weller, the naval gunfire officer for the 5th Amphibious Corps, planned the first rolling naval barrage of the conflict. In Weller's own words, he wanted to, quote, wring the last ounce of potential from the naval gun. As the Marines fought ashore, American ships nudged their firepower forward in 100-yard increments, providing a curtain of protective fire as the landing force rushed ashore, bringing its artillery, Sherman tanks, and LVTs onto the beach. Air coordination teams also contributed their own advanced tactics. Prior to Iwo Jima, supporting aircraft had fallen under the strict control of Navy command centers at sea. In order to improve the responsiveness of naval air at Iwo Jima, Marine Colonel Vernon McGee organized an experimental control team that would take that authority ashore. He used his Landing Force Air Support Control Unit, yes, that's a bit of a mouthful, to introduce minimum strike altitudes, land-based firing ceilings, and other deconfliction measures that helped the 5th Amphibious Corps achieve its greatest coordination to date. These innovative procedures and the proximity of McGee's control teams embedded ashore delivered the most flexible air support yet seen. The Marines had come a long way since their combined arms conviction of the interwar years, and few could speak to that development as well as the Japanese commander on Iwo Jima, Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kurabayashi. From an underground bunker, looks like we're refreshing. Sorry about that. There we go. From an underground bunker late in the battle, Kurabayashi dictated this to one of his staff officers. Quote, I am not afraid of the fighting power of only 3 American Marine divisions if there are no bombardments from aircraft and warships. This is the only reason we have to see such a miserable situation. From the Pacific campaigns and through the immediate post-war years, the Marine Corps engaged in a distinct period of combined arms adoption. Based on the conviction it carried forward from the interwar period, the Marine Corps scaled both tools and techniques as it took an increasingly effective combined arms approach in the battles for Tarawa, the Marshall Islands, the Mariana Islands, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. The Marines also learned to advocate for their combined arms approach, although that advocacy was indefensibly delayed in certain cases. I'm thinking here of the carrier-based Marine pilots, which did not appear until late 1944. Alongside the Navy, the Corps embedded a number of supporting command and control agencies, both ashore and afloat. Those advances gave way to the familiar Fire Support Coordination Center, Tactical Air Control Party, Direct Air Support Center, and a litany of additional agencies that contemporary Marines know so well. I can't move on without mentioning the meteoric growth of Marine aviation during the war. The Marines' swelling responsibilities in the Pacific demanded increased resources, of course. By the war's end, the Corps fielded 6 combat divisions and 5 aircraft wings, reflecting the Marines' growing attachment to air-ground operations. As shown in the graph here, the Corps' air arm grew 20-fold from its pre-war strength and accounted for more than 20% of the service's personnel by 1945. Those numbers would remain roughly consistent for the coming decades. From that initial period of exploration, the U.S. Marine Corps slowly but steadily built a combined arms conviction, whereby the Marine Corps, built a combined arms conviction. That philosophical conviction gave way to an intense season of adoption fueled by new battlefield weapons and the harsh realities against a Japanese enemy in the Pacific. This adoption and realization eventually gave way, after defense reorganization and the Korean War, to what I'll label a period of employment, whereby the Marine Corps surged, refined, and reorganized its combined arms capabilities according to the demands of the Cold War and then the post-Cold War periods. Notably, I have much more to consider in this final and more modern period. How did the Corps' divergent experience in Vietnam shape its combined arms posture? How did the shift to expeditionary warfare after that conflict in Southeast Asia adjust that philosophy? Again, more research to do. But there's little doubt that present-day Marine conceptions, to include the Marine Expeditionary Force and the Marine Littoral Regiment, are built firmly on this foundation of combined arms employment. While the future of combat presents no shortage of uncertainties, the effective combination of arms and the integration of warfare domains will prove a critical feature. If the past is any indication, the Marine Corps will play an essential role in charting the next course of combined arms warfare. I thank you very much for your time and look forward to some conversation and questions if we might have it.
We're going to ask for any questions that use the mic so it gets on the recording. Paul, I guess you get the first one.
Thank you. Paul Westermeyer, Marine Corps History Division.
Yes, sir.
It's almost more of a suggestion, expansion.
Please.
I really like your breakdown into 4 periods, but I do think exploration needs to be expanded earlier to around 1813. Captain Samuel Miller's force at Bladensburg and in 1813 at St. Leonard's Creek. Well, that was 14 also, but in 1813 he was in Annapolis. 120 Marines and 3 12-pounder artillery pieces, and they fought as a combined artillery infantry unit, both at St. Leonard's Creek and at the Battle of Bladensburg. So I think that pushes this. Now, I haven't seen any information that indicates that they were thinking combined arms. They just said, hey, take these artillery pieces and fight with them, take these Marines and go fight with them. But
certainly worth a mention. Thank you,
Yeah.
Paul. I will be booking some office time with you to get more on that. Thank you so much.
There's another question here. There you go.
Good evening, sir. Lieutenant Colonel Okamoto from Japan Self-Defense Force, CSC. Thank you for your presentation. I will understood how Marine Corps cultivate itself as a combined arms force, and as well, Japan played an important role for your development. Yeah. So my question is, Japan doesn't have Marine Corps, so I am wondering, so how does Marine Corps at that time distinguish their missions? So between from the the Marine Corps equipped with ground forces, artillery, aircraft. I think it's similar to Army, the Air Force, maybe. So how did Marine Corps understood itself as independent services? Does it make sense for you, sir?
It does. I don't know if I'm the perfect person to answer that. I think our collective volume will help answer how the Marine Corps pictures itself. I think it's related to this philosophy of combined arms, and I think in part the Marine Corps' development of these capabilities is certainly connected to its search for survival, which is to say the missions the roles and missions it's providing are reflective of its desire to survive, and they're responding to that. To include the post-war unification struggle, when the Marine Corps, having done the heroic things it does in the Pacific, might still not exist just a few years after the war. So I think, to answer your question, I would hope that every one of our authors on this project might help to answer your question when we're done.
Thank you very much.
That's a great segue. Hope to see you next. Am I on now? Yeah, that's a great segue. So we hope to see you next month to hear more about that. Okay, other questions?
Hey, Rob Malcolm, CSC faculty advisor. Why bookend the adoption phase in 1953? Was there something during the Korean War that was a further development of combined arms versus 1945, say, as a bookend?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for it. I'm open to revising that bookend. The reason I've got it in 53 right now, and I'll reflect some of my bias in the aviation command and control field, but the MAX is not really solidified until the Korean War. The MAX as it exists today, the Marine Aviation Command and Control System. And so I still need to answer that question for myself, but my hypothesis, my hunch is that it needs to be in 53 because that architecture speaks to the problems the Marine Corps is solving, and I think it ought to account for the Korean War experience. But it's a great question, and you could provide an argument to move that to the left, but that's where I've got it now.
So these are insightful questions. As we all came together, as Chris alluded to at the start of this project, we were all experts ostensibly in some aspect of Marine Corps history, but for most of us, we were being asked to write for the first time about the entire history. And one of our big debates is, how are we going to periodize this in order to make each of our respective themes make sense? And I can tell you in the work I've been doing, I've already changed my periodization several times in an attempt to try and make sense of it, adopt a model that's useful for helping understand it. So great question.
Yeah. And I would say when I started this project, I probably would have slapped that at 1945 or at least 1947. And yet the more I look into this litany of agencies that many of you are familiar with from your various MOSs, they're emerging informally in the Pacific. And it's really the post-war period and the Korean War experience that solidifies that architecture. And so I think that's an important part of the adoption phase, the way I see it.
I'd like to comment a little bit on armor. When the Marines stand up the first division as the World War II starts, the Marine Division has an organic tank battalion. It may have been light tanks at the beginning of the war, but it was medium tanks by the end of the war. Mm-hmm. The Army infantry divisions did not have organic tanks. They did have them attached with some frequency in the European theater, much less so in the Pacific theater. So and of course the Marines had a organic tank battalion for the Korean War, and again in Vietnam. Whereas the Army Infantry Division, Straight Infantry Division, did not have organic tanks in World War II, in Korea, or in Vietnam, which would mean that the Marine Division, which most of us think of as kind of an infantry division, was actually more combined arms than the Army counterpart in the infantry divisions.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Rudd. That's a good point, and I appreciate the contrast, which really draws out that point. The Marines are pretty disappointed with the Stuart tank, which I had on the Guadalcanal picture early on, but the medium Sherman they jump behind. But the contrast with the Army divisions would make it a great point here. Thank you.
Hey, good evening. I'm Andrew Richard with the CDET faculty. My question is about your exploration period a little bit. And I'm curious about what you found in your research between Navy and Army influences in the early days of Marine Corps Combined Arms, culturally and practically with equipment.
Yeah, I regret that I just don't have enough mastery to speak specifically to the equipment. I would say that, culturally, the Marines are a naval force. And so they are beginning to man naval guns increasingly throughout the 19th century. And some, those maybe predisposed here, see that as the pathway to protect the Marine Corps' survival in the final decades of the 19th century. So I think there's an interesting relationship there between naval artillery and the preservation of the Corps. Jack Schulimson has a great book, The Marine Corps Search for a Mission, that kind of brings you out of this period when we shift toward an advanced base force and something a little more aggressive. But I guess my simple answer, lacking more expertise, is that naval relationship is dominant and the Army influence grows over time. And yet is not competing with the naval influence in the 19th century. That's my quick take on it.
Any questions from the right half of the room? Sean.
Thank you. Sean Griffin from College of Distance Education and Training. The question is with regards to the makeup of the 4th Marine Brigade, where you had the 5th and 6th machine gun battalions. So I recall reading from Hoffman's biography of Chesty Puller. He was adamantly against the idea of disestablishing machine gun battalions. That the idea that if a regiment is supported by a battalion whose business is machine gunnery, you get a better quality product. And I was curious whether your research revealed, was this simply an idea that machine guns are best used as weapons companies within infantry battalions where the battalion commander owns them, or what was the during the conviction phase there, what was the reason for the decision to get rid of machine gun battalions? Thank you.
Yeah, I regret I don't have a great answer for that. I can't speak to it. That's an important point. I'll need to take down. No. It's okay. It's okay. I don't mind it.
Can you pass this back and then we'll pass it forward?
Sir, Rahul Singh from Expeditionary Warfare School. The question I had was, what since the Army had similar incentives during World War I, World War II, why did what made the Marine Corps unique in the sense that we adopted a combined arms mindset? Are we so different from the Army in that regard? Because they too employ combined arms, but at a higher echelon. What makes us unique from the Army and maybe foreign services as well, considering that we've all faced very similar incentives?
Yeah, I guess I would say, in the modern period, there's no doubt the Marine Corps envisions itself as a middleweight force that can bring each of these weapons to bear against an enemy, and that's an important contribution to the joint force. I would say, speaking historically, and as we look at this conviction and maybe adoption phase, what sticks out to me is the Marine Corps solving the problem of the amphibious assault, which compels a combined arms solution at the beach, particularly against a exceptionally prepared Japanese defense. That isn't to say the Army didn't have that problem too, but the Army had different shades of that problem and was much more concerned with larger, more sustained operations, and in fact took a very different posture to that problem, a slower, more methodical posture instead of a rapid assault. So that's where I would answer.
Thank you.
Larry Burke, aviation curator here at the National Museum of the Marine Corps. At the risk of being more of an observation than a question, just some things to think about as you look at this. I think marine aviation from 1917 through at least the end of World War II is really kind of fighting against the other services. So in World War I, the problem is that if the Marines are going to get into World War I, they're going to go in under the Army Air Services rules for how they're running the air war. And that leads them to, no, we're going to do our own thing, and that sort of gets sidetracked into the Northern Bombing Group. World War II you get the very practical problem that the Navy says we need as many carrier pilots as we can get, and we don't see the point in training Marines as carrier pilots if they're just going to go ashore. And so it's not until well into World War II that it's seen that, no, we're getting enough pilots now, we can start to train the Marines in carrier aviation, and at that point, Marines are in a position where they can support the initial assaults, as was written down in the tentative landing manual. And then when you go into Korea, once again, the Marine Air is stuck working under, USAF doctrine. And it's not until the retreat from Chosin Reservoir that the Marines finally get to practice that combined arms that they've been writing about since 1938. So in that sense, I think your adoption in 1953, I think it does fit into that they finally get a chance to prove, what it is they've been saying all along.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's an important consideration, and admittedly, I was looking at it from the command and control architecture, but that's a great point to reinforce the 53 checkpoint. I will be honest, I think a gap that I still need to square is this delayed advocacy for Marine carrier pilots, because that if I label it a period of conviction, it takes the Marine Corps an awful long time to aggressively advocate that Marine pilots be supporting the landings in the Pacific. And there's environmental reasons for that, but I think it's a point I have to dig into. It's a discrepancy I have to dig into. Thank you.
Al Adler, I'm a docent here at the museum. The exploration phase, those dates include the Seminole Wars. I'm just curious if there's any examples of exploration with combined arms that you've discovered during the Seminole Wars?
Yeah, so Henderson leads the expedition in the Second Seminole War and comes back at least buoyed by the performance of artillery. I think this contributes to his growing conviction, but I don't see any institutional changes beyond the conviction of a commandant. Yep.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for the pitch first, Chris. As you move into the post-Korean War phase of this project, one of the things I'm Mike Morris, by the way, from SAW for the audience. One of the things that I would encourage you to keep a weather eye on is the way the Marine Corps organizes its artillery at a corps level, at a MEF level. Because we see that in World War II, as you're well aware. We don't fight at that level in Korea. We go to Vietnam and we don't employ a corps artillery per se with 3 MEF. And then in the subsequent big shows, Desert Storm, OIF-1, once again, this is a construct that is not resourced in the way that you would expect or see in an adjacent U.S. Army Corps. And in terms of large unit combat operations, I'm not sure what that says exactly, but that is a thread worth following and maybe ruminating on a bit as to the way that we apply combined arms at scale as opposed to perhaps further down the organizational hierarchy.
I'll take good note for several reasons. Thank you for that, Dr. Morris, both for your artillery background and your Vietnam War expertise. So look forward to staying in touch with you on that. I'll book office time right after I get with Paul on 1813. Thank you.
We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, sir. Hey, Mike Skaliski, non-res EWS, FACAD, big fan of the Marines. Appreciate the pitch. More of a personal question, 2-parter. Which of these periods did you find the most challenging to research, and why? And then, were there any research materials that you used outside of the Marine Corps provided ones that were noteworthy, whether they were because they were from a foreign military, a different service, et cetera? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Geez, which one was the, I would have to go to the extremes of my expertise, which is to say outside of my expertise. Both the first and fourth phases kind of sit beyond my previous work. So I would say anytime a scholar is orienting to a new phase is a difficult transition. So exploration and employment for me there. Certainly just the difficulty finding great sources in the 19th century that speak to this problem is a challenge, and it makes it difficult to piece together a coherent storyline. So I think I'm still working on that. And then, about sources, I haven't had an issue. It's just the hard work that has to happen to get to the sources and to get through them and to process them. I can't complain about any absence of sources. It's just getting to them. Certainly, I've used mostly Marine internal sources to the Marine Corps at the archives in Quantico, files available online. Army and Navy documents help to contrast these experiences, but I can't say I've considered foreign sources to help tell this particular story. But certainly the sister services help to paint a contrast to Dr. Rudd's earlier point about tank employment. These are important benchmarks to help show why this story is unique to the Marine Corps. And so they're helpful in fleshing that out.
Any more questions? All right, well then I'll make a few concluding remarks. So the first thing I want to say, don't go away, is having spent a career in Marine fighter attack squadrons, one of our specialties obviously is to focus on close air support. And to be honest, we would get beaten at fighter stuff all the time, but it is my strong conviction that we could do CAS better than anybody else. And I don't mean that as a disrespect to our fellow services, but I saw it time and time and again in training and combat and other things. And to me, it boiled down to two things. We could do things that other people couldn't do, but we were also willing to do things that other people wouldn't do, such as fly under an active gun target line with a jet. That's not a natural act, I can tell you, right? So Major Hemler, Chris, I want to say that I've really enjoyed what you presented to here today, the scholarship, because it really helps get to the root of some of those essential questions. And I'm talking about CAS here, but I think it's more indicative of combined arms in general. Number one, that willingness is born of a culture that I now realize goes all the way back to the birth of marine aviation and some of the earliest ideas of what it meant to have this new capability and how it's going to be integrated. So cultural things. And then in terms of, the other capabilities, what you could actually do, some of the same structures that were in place, well, when I was flying, maybe they're still there today, I don't know. But they were born of, a hard-earned experience on the various islands of the Pacific. And once proven there, they lasted so long because they worked. So your scholarship and the elements you've touched upon have really brought me to a deeper understanding. And I cannot wait to see the whole chapter when it's done. To the audience, I want to say that as a lecturer, there's kind of three outcomes of a lecture. The worst case is when you finally get done, you get to the last word, and there's no questions, and everybody just wants to leave. The second best case is when you finish, and the questions are of such a nature that you know the answers, and they all allow you to bring up all these interesting stories that didn't make it into the script, the stuff that was cut for time. But the best case is when people actually challenge what you presented, give you new food for thought, maybe some new rocks to look under, and things that help you refine your scholarship in a truly symbiotic relationship between, the audience and the speaker. And I saw the best of that tonight, and I'm really looking forward to our remaining lectures. Can you move forward to that slide that has thank you. Just want to end with a couple of notes. Yes, so starting at the top, if you're a student here at Marine Corps University, I want you to be aware that this year, as part of our 250 celebration, we have instituted a new award called the Edwin North McClellan Award, named after the first director of Marine Corps history. This will be presented to the best student paper in any school that makes some use of Marine Corps history as a part of its argument and makes use of some primary resource from the Marine Corps archives. So we're encouraging you to come to the archives, make use of them, and incorporate that in your research this year. And we will reward the best papers in each school that demonstrate that. If you want to know more how to do that, well, then stop by History Division or speak to some of the historians and archivists who are sitting back there in roughly the 5th row. We love talking about this stuff, and we encourage you to come visit. And then maybe for some of the folks here who'd go on to graduate studies one day, beyond your current graduate studies in the Marine Corps University, but in civilian institutions, or maybe to some of the folks who are watching this online, I mentioned our fellowships, the Gridley Memorial Master's Thesis Fellowship and the Shepherd Memorial Dissertation Fellowship. These are key programs for helping young scholars who might be interested in Marine Corps history to have a reason and means to study that. And I can tell you from personal experience, when you walk up to a school and want to study military history, they may say, I don't know if we should do that. But when you walk up and say, I've got a fellowship and the Marine Corps wants to support me in this study and the Heritage Foundation wants to support me in this study, that shows your school that what you want to study has merits, and that can be a game changer. So I would encourage people in this room who go on to pursue careers in history or watching online to please apply for those fellowships so we can recognize the folks that are out there and promote scholarships such as this in Marine Corps history. So thank you for your attention tonight. Really appreciate the folks who came out and decided to spend their evening with us. And I hope to see you all again at our next installment, which is October 20th, when some guy is going to talk about the Marine Corps' long relationship with the U.S. Navy and the way that's defined the Marine Corps in the long term. So have a great evening.